Everybody loves Kirblog. That's all I got. Short notice. Doing a little short one this weekend. Very swamped with work, but want to do a little something. I was having a thought. I was just watching a Pokemon Sun and Moon finally, after it's fucking half the internet spoiling it for me with pirating it. Pokemon Sun and Moon, the anime, has been airing on Disney XD recently. I've been catching up on that a little bit recently. And I was thinking about about Ash and some other characters in particular, about this little thing I've been noticing with a lot of big series that I love, in the curse of being an icon. And how there was a recent point that I kind of got to with something. I think it was triggered by talking about Kingdom Hearts one day. I remember, what kind of inspired this topic was actually something mildly negative. I was talking with, I was hanging out with a friend of mine who had been back in LA for the first time in a long time, and Mike and Steve were with us. And somehow we got on the topic of Kingdom Hearts, and I was explaining to them some stuff about some things about like certain story elements. And of course, whenever you talk about the story in Kingdom Hearts, you're always going to get some, some eye rolling and etc. But I remember Steve had made a point about how just about the convolutedness of the stories in general, which, fair enough. But I had countered later on with that point of just like, it's funny how, it is justifiably easy to like pick on that aspect about Kingdom Hearts, and yet mainly because it's so annoying, quote unquote, as to like how convoluted and weird and out there and the story is. And he was making the point of just like, I just want to play a game. And I made the counterpoint of like, but for the grand majority of its fan base, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as like I've kept on, say what you will about the story and how ridiculous it is, but it is the core reason that franchise has sustained itself and why people like it so much. And I thought about that, and then I was having a thought later about just how often that is the case, where the annoying factor is sometimes also what makes something so popular to begin with. Like, okay, I think of in my youth about, this is related, so bear with me. It's a little off topic though, but I think about in my youth when first person shooter games are getting to be really popular, and when I was in like high school, I used to kind of pick on Halo a little bit for being like, oh, it's just like the same like shooting guys and violence and dumb bullshit or whatever. But but then I remember I went to I think it was Booch, the guy who voiced the two characters named after him from Parody Rangers. I think he was having like a party at his place, and a bunch of people brought their Xboxes over, and they were LANing, playing the Halo 2 multiplayer mode, I think it was. And I played a little bit myself, and I fully profess I'm not very good at shooters, but I was reminded of like, okay, you know what? There is something to this. This is really fun. And also then later, I met people like Mark Swint and folks like that who genuinely really like the story and and characters and lore of Halo, to where I'm like, okay, yeah, there's value to this. And just because I find it's just all gritty and realistic and dark and gloomy, and you just go around shooting guys, I find that annoying, whatever, because I don't relate to that, or I don't like that personally. And yet those things are all major factors as to why they are popular in the first place. Getting back to characters though, yeah, I think about a lot of protagonists in particular who are often the face of a particular franchise, like the main character, like they represent the entire thing, as a whole, and all the merchandise and all the marketing stuff, and even just in general, when you think of something, you think of that character first, whether you like them or not. Another good example, actually, and especially with kind of what's going on with him lately, is Goku. Dragon Ball Super has been taking some pretty interesting turns, I think, especially with the recent arc that they've been doing. Without getting too deep into that, because of course I want to save that whole, all my thoughts on that for when the arc finishes and we do a Kirblog about it, inevitably, with Vegito EX and all those guys. But I find it interesting that the show is kind of, and the show has been for a while, owning the fact that Goku just kind of is the guy that he is, for better or worse, and sometimes often for worse in terms of how, he affects the lives of everybody around him. You know, like whenever Goku comes up in discussion with a lot of folks that, you know, claim to be decently hardcore DBZ fans, you know, it's often this whole like, oh, Goku's such a bad character. He's such a bad character. He's a bad person, and he's an asshole, and he's a bad father, and etc. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I mean, you're not. I mean, you know, he's you know, certainly maybe all of those things, you know, if you were to define it that way. But he's also the main character of the story, and he's also what drives the story forward, like, you know, by and large. And, you know, all those qualities about him are what make him interesting. Like, it makes him a character that is worth following. And it's funny, because I guess on this kind of side note of DBZ, not to delve too far into this, but, like, Gohan is another character where people just, like, really, really, like, I think are kind of unnecessarily harsh to, just because he's... Because it's funny, like, people, like, you know, for how much they rip on Goku, they rip on Gohan for completely different reasons. You know, like, oh, he's so weak, and I wish he was badass again. And it's funny, because now the series is making him into the, you know, that coolest version of him ever when he was Ultimate Gohan or whatever. And I'm curious to see how people are going to actually react to that when it's, you know, comes to fruition. But it seems like Vegeta is, like, kind of the only one, you know, fallible character, or rather infallible in terms of, like, well, he's infallible to the fan base because he is so fallible as a character. I think except for people who bitch and whine about, like, oh, they try to make him funny now. And I'm like, yeah, well, them making him funny also makes him interesting, so shut the fuck up. Nonetheless. But with Goku, yeah, it's like, I think of, like, you know, and regardless of, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's also just like an American fandom thing first and foremost, in which case it's not fair to judge that. But I think it's still a worthwhile example of, like, for a character that has the curse of, like, he's the face of the franchise and he's to blame for so many things, both now in the universe of his own, or multiverse of his own show, and also just in real life in terms of how people, you know, react to him and treat him and you know, get all pissy about him. And then I think about with Ash, and, you know, I covered so much of this on, like, the Pokemon X and Y Kirblog that I did with Derek Bittner, which I would recommend going to check that out if you haven't already. But, you know, like, Ash gets all that, and see, it's funny too, because Pikachu is technically the real icon when it comes to the Pokemon franchise as a whole. And Pikachu, I mean, you know, some people, like, rip on, like. And then even then, it's very rare when I see people being like, "I like Pikachu better when he was not skinny, like, and he looks all emaciated now or whatever." And I'm like, "You mean he is more animatable because he's not a ball shape?" Like, yes, the little chubby ball shape design was cute and all. I get that, but there's a reason why they changed the design. Everybody, but, you know, so I guess even to that extent, yeah, sometimes he gets a little bit of that flack too. But he's a little bit safer than Ash. You know, is constantly like assailed by people. It's like, I don't know. But yeah, it's, I was thinking about that recently where it's like, you know, I was just watching the Sun and Moon episode and he's just like, I enjoy him for what he is. Like, I was talking about this in the X and Y one that I did. But even then, like, I can't help now but think of just, like, every move he makes, the internet. It's like he can't win no matter what he does. If, like, oh, if he's nice to this character, then they're just like, oh, God, he's so boring and just, like, milquetoast and, like, vanilla now with the way his personality is. He has no personality or character development, which is not true. Or, like, if he loses a battle, then he's just like, oh, he's just so weak and lame, and I wish he'd win a Pokemon League or whatever. And it's weird because you run that balance of, like, because then I always, like, I think of Yugi, and Yugi is obviously, like, in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yugi has lost several matches, but 9 times out of 10, Yugi fucking wins everything he ever does. And I never see anybody complaining about how, like, boring he is for always winning every match. You know, regardless of, like, oh, but because he is the Pharaoh or whatever, but, like, you know, who's just the ultimate duelist and is always perfect at fucking everything or whatever. And arguably the duels that he lost were just circumstantial, like the thing with Kaiba. But it's weird when you're in a position like that and you're the person at the forefront of the show. You're carrying the entire story of whatever it is that you're a part of. You know, and then, like, because of that, if it's like, it's just so easy for people to just, like, turn on you. Like the people that are consuming the media that character is part of. It's so easy for them to just turn around and be like, well, this sucks, this is bad, I didn't like what they did. As I think about that too, I think about kind of a weird example, but it was because of something that was pointed out to me about them. So I haven't watched My Little Pony in like years and years. I dropped off at maybe like season 2 or 3 or something. I can't remember, but I followed it for a while. I enjoyed it, but I remember, and not to say that Twilight Sparkle is a perfectly fine character. She certainly wasn't my favorite, and I don't think she was a lot of people's favorites necessarily. But when we were watching some early episodes, I remember I was hanging out with Josh Tomamoto, and he made a point about, because I think I'd mentioned like, she's okay. She's a little bland. She's like, I mean, not that she doesn't have any personality, but like she's very, she's very like bland compared to the other characters, which are much more defined and, and kind of fully rounded. And she has like, interesting episodes, like from the stuff that I'd seen, like the stuff with Cadence and her brother or whatever. But she's still like, in terms of her core personality, she's very like normal compared to everybody else. Aside from just like, oh, she's kind of a bookworm, I guess, or whatever. And it's like, okay, sure, But either way, when I pointed that out, Tomar made he made the point later on of like, well, I think she's just like one of those kind of protagonists that is intentionally designed to be kind of normal and freeform, so that the audience can kind of project themselves onto them. Which when I think of something like that, I think of like. Actually, it's quite relevant now that I can say this with the Tome character, the white hat hacker player character in a video game. When you have a silent protagonist, or even if they're like very customizable and you can still like make choices and respond and say things or whatever, like in that case, but there's still very much, it's supposed to be like it's you in the game making these choices and you're doing whatever you want to do specifically, and I think that in cases like that, there is value to it. When it comes to, I don't know. See, when it comes to stories that are not interactive, like if it's like a comic or a movie or a show or whatever, where it's a finite story that usually has just a beginning, a middle, and an end, I find for me personally that because that sort of device is meant to be to make the character more relatable. But I find that I relate more to characters who do have a fully fleshed out kind of deal to them. Even in video games too. I actually don't often very much like characters, like main characters in video games that are just kind of blank personalities, like slates for you to put them on. I think I did actually a Kirblog a long time ago about player 1 versus player U, which was like about the value between if you have an actual blank slate player character or somebody who has a built-in personality or whatever, which I think even back then is when I was thinking about the prospect of whether I was going to include a player character or not, or just have Alpha as like the main guy that you control and do whatever with, and then decided ultimately to not do that. But either way, I see the value to that now, especially now that I've grown to learn more about games. But yeah, I personally find it more interesting when the character is well defined. And I think that that there still can be, that kind of general relatability to just be like whatever. I think that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I don't know. It seems like when you go that route, you run the risk of the audience finding, if the character's not specifically built to be that, like it's supposed to be you in the whatever. In which case, just when it's a video game or like a choose your own adventure like storybook or something, I don't fucking know. Doesn't really happen with movies or anything. You run that risk of like of people finding the character to be like not even obnoxious, just like disliking them, kind of like unfairly in my opinion anyway. I don't know. It's hard to figure out. And there's so many different examples. I've listed like a bunch of ones that I see the most kind of complaining about that. I try to understand where it comes from, and I often try to dissect that. I've dissected stuff with Goku and Ash in particular, like when I did the individual Kirblogs about them a long time ago. But I don't really always get where that kind of animosity comes from sometimes. I think that, if it's like an investment into the character where it's like, you're disappointed that they made a certain choice or whatever, and like you're upset that something happened. I think that that's fine because that's like you're invested into the story and everything around them. But when it's just like, oh, I hate this character because of whatever, and yet you're still, more than likely watching or playing or enjoying the thing that they're in. I don't know. It's just kind of like weirdly hypocritical to me, I guess. And I guess I don't know. I don't want this to necessarily just be like a rant of just like, I wish the people would stop complaining about this so much, because I do get it to an extent. I've had enough conversations with people about it to where I understand where that feeling of aggravation comes from, and I think I've certainly been there. I mean, like, when I watched, this is a perfect example. Breaking Bad. I talked about this in the Breaking Bad Kirblog I did earlier this month, a couple months ago. My bad. Losing track of time. For fuck's sake. I didn't relate to Walt. Mike always made the point to me. I think I repeated this before, but where Walter's not relatable. He's not. He's relatable in very different kind of ways, but he's not a good person. He's not a good guy, but he's the protagonist, and he's interesting. And he keeps everything, driven forward, and that's what, that's what kept things going with Breaking Bad. At the core was Walter. And even though I didn't relate to him until like the last episode, basically, I still found him to be interesting, and I was still invested into the story and everything else around him. And it's funny because kind of in tandem with this, another topic I've wanted to do for a long time is something about like that one cool character, like how the one side character who's better than the main character is supposedly, and sometimes I think about like, should they have been the main focus or something? Because like I think that when you have a protagonist that is very, very, I guess, unordinary, then that lends itself to like, I guess you have the risk of like whether or not they're relatable or otherwise, or if they're interesting and if they're too out there or weird or whatever. But I think, and again, that's personally what I find, to be cool when I'm watching stuff. But I don't know. Sometimes I also think that part of the reason why those kind of side characters are so interesting to people is because I don't want to say like in comparison to the main character, if they are that much more kind of, a blank slate to to insert your own sort of self onto or whatever, project yourself onto, it makes them look more interesting by comparison. I mean, maybe in some cases that's what it is, but I don't know. But then I think if you did make, except for certain cases like Better Call Saul, where it totally works because the whole world of that show is built around James McGill. But like, if you put the main focus on that character, I don't think it would be the most interesting thing necessarily, because sometimes those kind of characters serve better when they are a foil to somebody else or when they are in a supporting role and they don't get like, and that's the other thing too, when you don't get overblown with them. When you have the icon character that's constantly around, if they're not just like absolutely perfect in whatever way the audience wants them to be perfect, because that could be a trillion different fucking things, then like they bother you. And if hopefully what's happening around them isn't interesting enough that you're not invested, then sometimes the story falls the fuck apart. It's really tricky. In fact, it's even, admittedly, it's a challenge that I'm having to face and kind of already have faced in this early part of developing the game, where I was trying to make sure that alpha in this new continuity is not made useless by the existence of the player character, because I fully admit in the Tome series he was one of the less interesting characters, and compared to like Kerbifer or Nylock or GameSoft and etc. He and Flamey were kind of the least interesting, and then people still liked them for what they were, which is fine, but that's also why like I'm trying to make them both feel a lot more individualized, and I think that people are going to like these versions of them a lot more than any of the previous ones. I think that's kind of also, this is why I was kind of musing about this topic. So I guess, the reason that I put this one out here is I'm kind of curious for other people's opinions about this thing. So, I think that this is kind of the most that I have to say to start off with. Maybe I'll do a follow-up to this one. I'm actually really curious to what people would say about this. So I'm curious, in the comments below of this one, give me other examples of icons that you kind of see what I'm talking about with this. Maybe give some examples. I'm giving you homework assignments, everybody, because I'm curious genuinely for your feedback. Do you agree with what it is that I'm talking about? Do you think that there are other kind of points of this kind of in between that I didn't maybe hit up? I mean, I'm sure there are a billion things, but things that you could point out that I would love to hear. I'll keep a close eye on the comments on this one, and maybe I'll compile some of this stuff together for like a follow-up topic. I'm curious to maybe like try having a dialogue with people on their opinions about this, because maybe excuse me, maybe this will affect how certain things in the game will be depending on what people's thoughts are. So I'm curious. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. And as always, again, if you have any suggestions for future Kirblog topics, leave a comment about that too. You're more than welcome to. And don't know what the next one will be, kind of playing it by ear this last week of May because things have been very busy. But yeah, curious about all your thoughts. So thanks for listening. Thank you for hopefully potentially commenting. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.